We begin in Gaza, where the Israeli army has launched a new attack on the Strip's largest medical complex. There are reports of deaths and injuries inside al-Shifa hospital. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli troops have launched missiles and opened fire on one of the buildings. It says thousands of displaced Palestinians, patients, and medical staff are trapped inside. Several people have been arrested.
We're now besieged inside al-Shifa hospital. We're being heavily shot at. The occupation forces suddenly raided the hospital. As you can hear now, there are intense clashes going on. We're hearing sounds coming from the gate. There is shrapnel falling all over the hospital's courtyard.
A statement from Gaza's health ministry says it holds the Israeli occupation responsible for the lives of medical staff, patients, and displaced people inside the medical complex, and that the Israeli operation is a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. The health ministry accuses Israel of using fabricated narratives to deceive the world and justify the storming of al-Shifa. So in a few moments, we'll be speaking to Willem Marx in occupied East Jerusalem to find out what Israel has been saying about the attack. First, though, let's go to Hani Mahmoud, who's live for us in Rafah, that's in southern Gaza. Hani, what's the very latest that you're learning on what's going on inside al-Shifa right now?
Yes, sir. Well, just within the past 45 minutes, we looked at what looks like a leaflet dropped by the Israeli military, sharply ordering people in al-Shifa hospital, its vicinity, and the entire residential block surrounding the Shifa health complex, ordering them sharply to evacuate immediately to al-Mawasi evacuation zone. That's the western part of Khan Yunis city. Now, it's important to point out in an earlier statement, Hagari, the spokesperson of the Israeli military, said there are no evacuations needed for people, so people do not have to evacuate. And right now we see in this sharp statement ordering people to evacuate just shows the contradiction, the vagueness, as well as the misleading narrative of evacuation zone. People are now caught in between this right now, whether to leave and to trust the statement or stay where they at. We're talking about thousands of Palestinians who have been sheltering inside the complex since the beginning of the war. And it's important to point out this is not the first time al-Shifa hospital is being stormed in early December. The Israeli military made a list of allegations and stormed al-Shifa hospital, destroyed the vast majority of its property and severely damaged major buildings and medical equipment inside the hospital, arrested large number of people, close to 150 people were arrested inside the hospital. One more time, we're seeing the same patterns, but this time it happens under a group. It started at about 2:30 in the morning, where a group of special forces entered al-Shifa hospital disguised in civilian garments, and after that military vehicles and tanks under heavy coverage of attack drones and surveillance in drones, and military choppers surrounded the complex and start firing heavily at the complex and the surrounding area. There were fire that caught in some of the buildings, caught in fire at the vicinity of al-Shifa hospital. The reports of at least 80 people have been arrested, mostly women and young men right now have been arrested from al-Shifa hospital. There are reports of more death and injuries inside the hospital. We don't have a confirmation number of how many people have been killed inside, but the reports talk about many of them are in the courtyard or inside the buildings of the hospital right now.
Hani, give us a sense of who, and maybe how many if you can, who was in the hospital when this military operation began?
Well, so far what we know, the hospital has turned into an evacuation center where we're looking at hundreds of displaced families from the northern part of Gaza City and the eastern part of the Gaza City, the Shujai neighborhood, Zaytun neighborhood, after they were stormed repeatedly and invaded by the Israeli forces on the ground. They all ran to al-Shifa hospital and took it as a shelter. Now, the statement made by the Israeli military, it made a list of allegations, and it primarily primary among them is based on intelligence from the ground that they had the inside information of the operatives or militants inside the hospital. Now, this is a reminder of what happened in early December, the same exact list of allegations, and eventually what happened, there were only a couple of videos that were released by the Israeli military about the Shifa hospital, and none of the allegations was supported with any substantial evidence. We see this happening again overnight and early hours of this morning. There is no confirmation of who were the people who were arrested. There are talks about the 80 people, but based on eyewitness inside the hospital, mostly women and young men who were arrested from the hospital.
Al Jazeera's Hani Mahmoud, thank you very much for that report, Hani. I'll go now to Willem Marx, who is live in occupied East Jerusalem. Willem, what is the Israeli military saying about this operation?
They are calling it a precise operation, one that's predicated on the presence of Hamas fighters inside the hospital compound. They've confirmed to me in the last few minutes they have made arrests, and in terms of the reasoning behind this operation, here's what the spokesperson for the Israeli military, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said earlier.
Our targeted mission isn't just an operational necessity, it's a global imperative. Our forces have undergone specified training to prepare them for the sensitive environment and complex scenarios they may encounter. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. We seek no harm to the civilians that Hamas is hiding behind.
Now, Willem, it's quite notable that the Israelis don't always choose to comment in a detailed way on ongoing operations. How unusual is what we just heard for the Israelis to discuss this ongoing operation in such detail?
We've seen repeatedly over the last 5 months, Cyril, when Israeli forces have operated in and around hospital compounds, it's created a huge amount of blowback for them, both inside Gaza but also internationally. The fact they're releasing statements in the middle of the night as these operations are ongoing, in the light of the fact that there are social media videos being posted by those inside the hospital complex, an indication that they're aware of how contentious these kinds of activities are. Don't forget that medical facilities hold a special status under international law. It's part of their statement, Cyril. Interestingly, they talked about the fact that Israeli troops had been instructed on the importance of, quote, operating cautiously, as well as on the measures to be taken to avoid harm to the patients, civilians, medical staff and medical equipment. Another sign that they're aware that this will be a contentious raid and that the international response may once again place them under the spotlight.
Yeah, Willem Marx reporting from occupied East Jerusalem there. Thank you very much, Willem.